Hey, welcome everybody. Thanks for taking the time to join Daniel and I on this webinar talking about calendaring your time for success. And we're going to talk through what you need to do every day, week, month, and quarter that's going to directly impact the success of your business. These are things that aren't always the fanciest things to talk about. I mean, as far as like scripts and dialogues and new lead source, but these are the basics that power every day of your business and keep you from either drifting away from your goals or shooting at the wrong things and not revisiting your goals on a constant basis. So if you don't know me, I am the founder and chairman of Firepoint. Was in real estate, sold about just over 400 homes a year, had a couple mortgage brokerages, title companies, started Firepoint. We have thousands of clients across the users across the US and Canada. And thank you, Daniel, for joining me as well. Daniel, do you mind going through a brief introduction, kind of your history in real estate and what you're doing with MyOutDesk?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for joining today. I think Chris is absolutely right. Today's conversation is focused on business basics. When you're building a real estate team, one of the biggest challenges that you have is just staying focused. We're mostly ADD. I have ADD. It's crazy. And staying focused and doing particular tasks every day can feel overwhelming. But what we've created today is just a conversation around these are the things that are must-haves. You must have to build a large business. And so I'm super excited because I'm passionate about building large businesses, and that's why MyOutDesk exists. I'm a real estate broker, just like Chris. What I love about doing these with Chris is that we know the business. Like, unlike most vendors out there, we actually know what you do and what you go through. We've closed hundreds of listings. I personally have done hundreds a year, just like Chris, and we've learned through all the mistakes and had team members and built this thing. I'm excited to say MyOutDesk has had over 4,000 clients. We're 9 years in our history, which is crazy. Next year, we're gonna be 10 years old, which is awesome. And our passion is just providing leverage to real estate teams across the US and Canada. So that's what we do. We help on the admin side, the marketing side, and on the sales side. So let's launch in, man. What exactly are we talking about?
So really quick one to go through the Q&A process. If you have any questions that you want to go through, this is interactive, and we're pulling from 20 years of sophistication, education, knowledge in the industry between Daniel and I. So this is not like, hey, let's just get up and talk theory. This is talking shop, talking kind of down and dirty what we do with our clients every single day, what we dealt with in the industry, what we pull from best practices from thousands of different clients, both of ours. And so if you have anything you want to kind of talk through specifically, please put it in the chat here. But kind of what we're going to jump into right away, these are action items. So this is what are we going to do daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly. We're going to jump right into daily, and we're just going to go back and forth. So one of the things that we try and do, at least that I try to do, is break it down from like, hey, daily, what am I going to do for 30 minutes every day? And kind of the big thing I would say here, just personally, is mindset. That if you go into your daily activities and you let the 30 minutes turn into 3 hours, you're going to hate it and it's going to eat up your entire life. So when you do it, you block 30 minutes, you get through what you can in those 30 minutes, and you always move the ball forward in these little increments. If you say, well, I started 30 minutes, it turned into 4 hours, that's your problem and that's your fault, to be really direct there. Now, if you blocked 4 hours to work on improvements, completely up to you, but these are things, if you spend 8.5 or 9.5 hours working on your business and producing income, spend 30 minutes working on these things to keep moving the ball of the business forward. So jumping in, like one of the things I'm really passionate about is agent accountability, and then also recruiting. Danny, do you mind if I just jump into those, or do you want to kind of give some thoughts there?
No, I love it. Every single morning we have a huddle at 8:10 where we're doing agent accountability in our business, and we have another one at 9:10 because we have kind of two different sales teams or two different teams that help clients basically grow their business. And so, yeah, and usually it's 10 to 15 minutes, and we try not to go longer than that. So we're 100% aligned. So what do you do, Chris, in your huddles in the morning for your sales team, or what do you suggest your teams do?
Yeah, I would say from the agent accountability standpoint, I think there's a side of actually touching base with the agents. And if you're doing a one-on-one with each agent, which can be 5 or 10 minutes, they don't have to be these big, long, drawn-out meetings. But if you're doing that for 5 or 10 minutes, maybe it's 2 one-on-ones, depending on how big your team is. And for us, those one-on-ones had always been, you look at a couple leads, you pull up a couple random leads that they got in the last week, and you just make sure it has the 3 contact types, there are tasks, there are safe search, and are they following up with the leads? Because what we've done is I went through an account yesterday and did this kind of deep dive, and 85% of all of their leads that they got in the last 30 days had no contact attempts past the first 3 days. So like things like that, if you're not doing this quick little deep dive, you're not looking through all their leads, you're doing like a little litmus test, and then listen to a couple phone calls and do that coaching and then see how their pipeline's doing. So you do the one-on-one, but the other part I would say is you've got to look through leads on whatever system you're using, and you have to click through a couple. Don't look through all of them. Look through like 5 over the last week or 3 over the last week. You look through 1, but at least say, is my team doing their job? Because usually we spend, in real estate, spend all this money and training getting these leads in the system, and then it's a sales manager's job to check in and make sure they're being worked correctly. So it's working with the agent, but also some of the stuff we're going to talk about in a second, I know, is also checking on those other things, like make sure, are they following up with their clients? Like just what's happening? Are they doing what they need to? So maybe spend 15, 20 minutes in agent accountability. Because again, it's 30 minutes for the entire day. And then you jump into the recruiting piece. And the reason recruiting, I think, is such a big deal is it's the idea of top grading. And it's not the idea that you always have to be letting people go. But if you're not always interviewing and always recruiting, you're limiting your pool to who you look at. And if something happens, you don't have, you said it right before, if you don't have a bench sitting there of qualified candidates that want to come on. I remember we needed to fill a position here at Firepoint. We had 10 people that were waiting to work for us here because we'd already gone through the interview process, the recruiting process. We have a bench waiting. Same thing in real estate. You have those people waiting there, so if you're ever in a pinch, you have them. And kind of the other side of that is you look at some teams and they have a lead problem in the fact that they have too many leads. I mean, we have one team that had like 700 leads coming in a month and only 16 agents. So that's great for them, but if they want to do, say, 25 or 30 or 40 leads per agent, they might need 25 or 30 agents. And sometimes people look at recruiting as a once-a-month thing you do, but the reality, it's a sales funnel like anything else. So as a team leader or sales manager or whatever, you have to make those couple phone calls every day to mature and move that funnel forward or post that next ad. So it's a daily thing to check in, spend a couple minutes on instead of saying, hey, I'm going to spend every Friday for 8 hours. It doesn't always work.
Well, you said something that, so within MyOutDesk, we do this thing, it's called the 7-figure agent map, where we'll determine what stage you're in. And we've broken down the real estate kind of life cycle when you're owning a business. Like, you start out and you're brand new all the way to putting $1 million in the bank. And one of the distinctions is that around the fourth or fifth step in the real estate process, when you're doing like 500 to 750,000 in GCI, what has to happen is part of your day has to shift from trying to get listings to trying to get talent. And you have this mind shift of like, okay, I've done a good job of building a business. We have a process. We have a policy. There are people here, and now I need to recruit agents. And so it's really important that you're doing that at a particular stage within your development, because in the beginning, what you're doing is you're just trying to learn the business, set up systems, set up processes. But as you get larger and larger and you get more and more success, you need to bring more people in. And I think that's a huge thing. So if you're gonna prospect for real estate listings, at some point you'll also have to add prospecting for talent. And I think that's a mistake that people make, is not calendaring that time and just time blocking it just like anything else.
Absolutely. Can I ask you a question there?
Yeah.
So you at MyOutDesk, I mean, you're constantly, I mean, it's a huge process, constantly interviewing, recruiting, screening, even candidates that then you match with your clients. I mean, it's a constant process. So it's not like, hey, once a month, we're going to go look for people. That's something you built into your business that just happens, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what's crazy too is, so last month we added, I believe, 60 full-time virtual professionals. I mean, like we have a process where literally we're getting thousands of applications every month. And I think from a real estate perspective, if I were thinking about building a business, there are two sides of a business, right? So you have your sales side and then you have your operations side. And really it doesn't get that much more complicated in real estate than those two things. And so as you grow, your operations shift to, I need a transaction coordinator, listing coordinator, maybe a marketing coordinator. I need to hire a CRM like Firepoint. because I got to have something to kind of keep people accountable. I need to get a phone system built in, just like Firepoint does. So you start building all these operational things. And then at some point, you have to hire a leader. And then at some point, you have to hire a leader in the sales side. So one of the challenges for a real estate team is like, well, what do you mean recruit? Who am I recruiting? I'm only doing 100 deals a year. Like, what are you talking about? So I think it's really important to make sure you're focused on the repetitive recruiting early on that you need. Buyers agents, listing agents. That's what I would focus on. And then the one-offs, I would probably hire a recruiting firm, or somebody to help bring in that one talented person that does this all the time. Looks like we have a question. Listens to calls. What is that? So, Chris, I'm going to let you go at this one because your system does that. So I think it's a good one.
So really quick, one thing I did want to say, and this is from like my personal missteps in the past over a lot of different businesses, is as we're growing as managers and as leaders and entrepreneurs, a lot of times we haven't had people working for us doing the roles that we now need to hire. And so one of the things I think Daniel said is really important there is using a recruiter, using somebody to find talent. If it's not your expertise, and if you haven't managed 57 controllers in the past and you're trying to hire a controller, use somebody else to make sure you're finding the right skill set, right person, right motivation, help them or let them help teach you how to manage that person. So like if you're not the best business manager in the world, you going out and trying to interview and select that business manager might be wrong because you might be too influenced by their sales ability, not their business management ability. So there's a lot of good stuff there. Call recording. So in the sales process, everything is about, let's say, scripts, dialogues, how you handle that first call. And then once you handle that first call, it's all about how you handle the second one and the fourth one. And once they're a past client, it's all about how you handle that phone call when they're a past client. When you ask for the business, what do you say? Because everything builds, and one wrong phone call can destroy the entire process up until then. So the bad opening on a phone call, or when somebody says, hey, I'm already working with an agent, how you handle it? Somebody says, okay, or says, oh, no problem at all. I've got a list of properties, blah, blah, blah. Or what if I set you up on a saved search? It goes out once a month and you never have to talk to me again. Like, those types of things, that scripting and that dialoguing is so important. When you do your agent one-on-ones, or when you're doing your deep dive really quick, let's say each week or every day, clicking and having a system where you can record a phone call, or if you have a system that doesn't record a phone call, like Firepoint, incoming calls, outbound are all there. You can click and place. You can do it from home or at night, or it doesn't matter. But if you're not recording calls, you need to sit with the agent and make a couple calls with them and hear what they say on a voicemail if they're not getting callbacks. Hear what they say when they're presenting an inspection objection. Those things are so important because usually we think, hey, I'm going to teach the script once, everybody's going to do it. The problem is, and this came on another webinar last week, is things tend to go down, and if you don't do these little checkups to kind of like keep bumping them back up, everything slowly falls apart. Some people are stellar and will always get better on their own, but you don't assume that. And so if you have to listen to calls, you have to script through what people are saying, and those can be really hard to do, and most people hate it because we're not trained sales managers. But when you're a sales manager, you're on the demos, you're at the presentations, you're at an open house event, showing them what to say and what to do. And call recording or scripting with them and listening to those calls live is priceless, because all these leads are coming in, all the interactions they're having at the grocery store, at an open house, with lead calls, whatever, are happening when you're not there. Leveraging that time to listen to those calls is worth so much money. Not doing it is usually because somebody's lazy or doesn't want to or wouldn't make those phone calls themselves. But the financial impact, the dollar productive activity for that is astronomical.
Yeah, so we do it a little different just because your system records, and I love that. But there's a really good point here. If you're a real estate broker and you have a team, we've trained our people to come to the sales manager and say, I've got a recording and it didn't go well. Mm-hmm. And then we take that recording, have one of our virtual professionals actually type it out on a Word doc or a Google Doc or whatever. And then the sales manager and the agent can actually go through that doc, and instead of listening to a conversation that's 20 minutes, you can read through it in like 5 seconds. And on a Google Doc, you can do suggested changes, and I really love that. We were role playing today in a huddle, the decision maker conversation. Are you a decision maker? Well, how do you ask that question, and like, what do you say? And they bring their issues, so that's a really important thing. In your daily huddle, one of my questions is, do you have any obstacles today? Are there any challenges you guys are facing? Like, are you guys hearing any feedback? I mean, we know right now, because we're going to timestamp this recording, Houston in Texas and Florida is having issues. Well, that actually, because we're nationwide, that actually is affecting our sales. So we're talking about, like, what do we do when somebody's like, hey, I'm in Florida, I don't know if I'm going to have a business next week, so you got to call us back. And so we're working through not only what we're saying, but how we're saying it. And then we train our agents to bring that to the leader so that there's not the accountability falls on the person. And I think that's a massive point in this. But I hope that, Carl, answers the question there. Okay, so what would you do on a weekly basis, Chris? Like, what we just hit the daily, so a huddle, accountability, one-on-ones. I think that's good. Talk to us about a sales meeting. What are you doing in a sales meeting? And then we'll jump onto an operations meeting. What does that look like?
Absolutely. So I think with the weekly, so you're scheduling an hour, maybe 2 hours, depending on how big your operations are and what you're doing. And this is the time you spend in these meetings doing this process. And again, you don't let it go over. This is what you do. You do the rest of your business. If you choose to do more, make it your choice, but don't feel like operations are swallowing you. You have to push back on it and say, here's what I'm going to spend improving the operations this week. And then again, you deal with your firefighting, your rules, everything else that you do during your day-to-day business. So one I would say is doing that lead auditing. So you have your sales meeting. Part of the sales meeting that we always did is you go through and you pull up a couple leads in front of everybody on a screen, on a TV, and it's just random leads. You pick a couple and you say, okay, this one's amazing, this one's horrible. And it's that wall of shame or the wall of, whatever, wall of praise, gold stars, however you want to do it, is you do it in front of everybody, and then you play a couple random calls that are over 30 seconds. Even if it was just a voicemail, a 60-second call, you play it in front of everybody, and everybody gets a chance to critique and go back and forth. And it's random, so some people are going to get railed on, some people are like, oh my gosh, that was horrible, but it gives everybody a chance to make it public, and it starts to change the dynamic. When people know that their calls are going to be listened to, they respect it more, and they're more on point when they're making that phone call. They have to be more intentional before they make it. Say, okay, what am I going to say? Am I in a place and a mindset to make this call to be able to respond right away, or am I distracted with something else? So that was one piece of the sales meeting. Another one is, how are you getting, and this is something that you and I were talking about, how do you get commitment from the sales team? So having your kind of commit call, like, hey, what are you doing this week? What do you commit to? And you might have things that you put in from the team side, like you have to make 50 phone calls a day, or it's asking them to commit, what are you doing this week? I'm going to get 3 under contract. I've got 5 that are out there. I'm going to show the 27 houses and get this guy under contract. But you go through and you write it down. And this is the public commitment of everybody in the sales team of what they're going to do. And it starts kind of open up and publicize what's happening. And we do it inside Firepoint. And everybody from the entire company is able to be on that call, development, account management, and they're listening to the salespeople committing to what they're doing. I'm going to follow up with these 13 people, and I'm going to close these 4, whatever that is. It changes that dynamic, though, because sales fuels the organization. Sales are usually paid really well, but they're also out there putting their hide on the line and risking, saying, I'm going to commit to this. It's a different job than usually admin or an operations position, which is fielding things that are coming in. They're not out there having to hunt. So the commitment, going through the auditing so it's completely public. And then another piece that I talked about is, what do the conversations look like when they're not meeting expectations? So if somebody's not meeting expectations, you say, hey, how did you do last week on these things you committed to? How do you handle those conversations publicly? When do you take it and make it private? And I think a lot of dysfunction can come up in a team depending on how you handle conflict. That if you're making a change, somebody says, well, I don't really like that, and they say that publicly, how you handle that, or whether you do or don't handle that, can have a huge impact on the health of that team, because those things will happen all the time.
Yeah. Well, when you're managing a large team, I just sent it out because our sales team is growing, and as it grows, people are like, well, I want to take a vacation, and what if I need to slide my schedule, or what if what happens if I'm out and this guy closes a deal for me? Is that so and literally just yesterday, I launched Rules of Engagement. It's a Google Doc. We listed a bunch of issues and put a nice, pretty kitty cat on the front, and it says, let's play nice, right? And because I want to create that team environment where we're helping each other close deals, but we're also holding each other to a particular standard. So we have a mid-month kind of check-in, and ours is tomorrow, which will be the 14th. And what we do in that meeting is we've all made commitments at the beginning of the year or beginning of the month about what our production is going to be on the sales team, sales and marketing. because marketing drives the leads and sales drive the revenue. And wildly enough, if you're listening, this is one of my favorite things. Revenue cures all problems. Like every problem in the world, sales cures it. So if you're making money, you can buy your way out of a lot of mistakes or problems. But if you're not, then those problems become more and more stressful. So for us, we commit at the beginning of the month, and then we do a mid-month check-in to just say, okay, are you on track or off track? And it's an expectation. If they're on track, we pat them on the back. Congratulations. We ask them to share why, what they're doing or what their success looks like. And then, hey, if you're on track or way above, do you want to commit to a higher number? Do you want to, what are you going to do? Like, where are you at? And then the next piece is, well, if they're off track, then they automatically have to adjust their activity level by some means. So either they're pounding more calls, they're doing more presentations, they're going to go on more listing, they're going to do something that is shifting their activity, and they're going to commit to that for the last 15 days of the month.
Yeah, I think that's huge, because when you look at real estate sales management in general, usually you go to a team leader and say, hey, show me what your team committed to this month. They're going to be like, they have to make the calls I told them to make. I mean, it's not usually a well-socialized process that everybody knows what's happening. If they said, hey, all these people, are they on track or off track for the month? And they're like, well, I don't know. The closings haven't come in. I mean, those are the things that they have to, sorry, I kind of just jumped around there, but they have to be institutionalized. It has to happen every week, has to happen every month. You put these things on your schedule and you start doing them. Now you start having transparency in this process that for some people is this black box of, oh, do I have 5 or do I have 10 closings this month? And I have no idea. I just hope for the best.
Right. So that's probably those are the accountabilities, the weekly meeting, also throwing in a coaching component. It's so funny. If I can get another kid to tell my kids what I want them to hear, they listen. But if I tell my kids something, it's like, Dad, what? No. And so I believe that there's a lot of coaching companies out there that coach teams. They coach around productivity. They coach objection handling. They're just. I think that's a huge piece that agents misunderstand, because like, do you have a coach? They say yes, and then you ask the next question is like, do you invest in coaching for your people? And I think that's another opportunity that us as an industry can kind of embrace. There's a lot of great platforms out there for coaching teams these days. What would you do on a monthly basis, Chris? What are you doing every single month inside of a real estate business to drive results?
Hey, can we jump back to one more weekly piece?
Oh, yeah. Did I miss one?
Yeah, I think one thing there is, so we talked a lot about the sales side and the auditing the sales team. I think another piece to that, which directly affects sales and affects marketing, is what you and I have talked about, the operations meeting. That your level of service, and I'm coming this directly from you, but your level of service will directly affect the referrals coming in, which are your highest converting, your lowest cost. Those are the gold that continues to build and builds a referral network. And what was this thing you were saying? Like, sellers never hear updates from agents. And so when you're having your operations meeting, I mean, excellent service breeds those referrals. And so making sure that they're getting the updates from the agents, from your staff, that your service level is high. And one of the things that you were talking about is like the cadence. I mean, can you talk through a little bit what you were saying about the cadence that great teams have as far as when they put things live, when they give feedback to make sure it's always happening? Yeah,
I'm glad you pulled me back and redirected, because this is really important. We would live everything on Thursday afternoon. All listings got added to MLS on Thursdays, and then all client feedback got delivered on Tuesdays. So open houses ran over the weekend. And this is a big and that was the cadence of our operations team. So we would report back to our listing people, what the activity level online was, what the traffic was at the house, any agent feedback that we got. So we had virtual professionals calling everybody who went into any of our listings and said, hey, I noticed you were there. What do you think of our listing? And do you have any feedback for us? Do you have a buyer? Do you have a seller? Like, what's going on? Why are you there? And then we would compile all of that into a report that we provide to our sellers. And I think one of the things that people underestimate is just that the power of communication. We would also write into our listing agreements something called a strategic price decrease. And we would explain, look, we've got 30 days to get this thing off the market. We priced it right. We have an appraisal. We've got professional photos. We're going to do these 100+ marketing things. We're going to do open houses. We've done everything we can. But in 30 days, we're going to have a price drop of this property if we don't have it in contract. And typically, we'd be having those conversations 20 to 25 days into it, and it's all driven by the operations team. The other thing that we would do is just simply ask, hey, are we serving you, the way you want to be served? We call it here at MyOutDesk, we call it the steak dinner. You ever go to a great restaurant and you sit down and they bring you the steak and the waiter is over there and hovering a little bit, and then he comes over, sir, is everything turning out exactly the way you expected it? Like, a fine dining restaurant has figured this out because they are in the service world, and somehow as real estate brokers, we've missed that. Like, our job is to deliver the expectations of our clients and set those expectations and fill them and make sure that they're getting the steak exactly the way they want it. And so when you're an operations leader, transaction coordination, listing coordination, making sure the marketing is on point, delivering the right amount of leads to the sales team, like looking at financials, looking at headcount, looking at, operation efficiencies, like all of those things are the operations leader's role. And if you don't have an operations leader's role, guess what? You get to wear that hat too. Yeah. So it's really important to have a sales and marketing meeting, and it's really important to have an operations meeting on a weekly basis. And it's also important to roll those two meetings together once a month so that everybody within the organization is talking about the improvements that need to be made to serve the right steak dinner to the client.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And that's kind of the whole idea, perception is reality. And if the consumer thinks that something's not going well, even if you did it the right way, the reality is their perception. And if you want to please them, you've got to listen to them and ask those questions. And so I think that you have the sales meeting, you have the operation meeting every single week. And then on a monthly perspective, so one thing that we do, and I'll probably put this at the end, is we do a monthly check-in with our quarterly planning. And we'll go into the quarterly planning process, but you always do a monthly check-in to say, hey, are we on track for our quarterly planning? So everybody in leadership inside Firepoint has their quarterly planning, has their 6-month planning, you go through that process. And every month you're saying, hey, am I making progress this? Because maybe you had a crazy month and you didn't, but that's okay. You're going to move a few of the needles this next month. I'm going to make that a priority and block the time on my calendar because we decided as a company that's what we're going to work on this quarter. So checking in really quick, the quarterly planning. And again, I would block an hour for this every month to kind of go through this quick process. It usually take a lot of time when you have a cadence with it. Also, monthly action items. Monthly action items might be something that is part of your quarterly, or it's like, hey, I'm just going to deal with this next month. So you make sure you have those on your schedule, time blocked out so they don't get swallowed up by something else. And what you said, as a leader of the business, you're wearing so many different hats. Moving all these balls forward is at the end of the day your responsibility. Even if you have other people to do that, you're going to hold them accountable to it. And then kind of that monthly management by objectives and that monthly commit that's open to everybody. So kind of what you said, where you have that monthly, everybody commits to something, and then weekly for us, they were committing to smaller pieces, like what are they going to do that week to kind of move this big commitment forward. And then also monthly, something we talked about just before we got live with this, is that P&L review of sitting down and looking at, hey, where is my money going? Where is it coming from? What's left at the end of the day? I think you said the funny word, which is balance sheet, which at the end of the day, does everybody in real estate know where their balance sheet lies? Are you paying yourself enough for what you're doing? Are you paying yourself a salary? And some of the stuff you might address one time, then it's more just the quick check-ins. But for us, it was that monthly, spend an hour, sit down, review these things. You're not going to review everything every single month. Some of it's left for quarterly, but you've got to sit down and look at the business, look at, are you moving the needle forward no matter what's happening on the day-to-day sales operations side? Well,
Chris and I are nerds. I was going to pull up this book, and he goes and he pulls up the exact same book, and I'm like, oh my God, this is awesome. But yeah, the financial review, I was like, hey, before we start, I'm like, hey, let me go grab this book. It's the most important book. It's how a small business should run their financials. And he's like, what, you mean this book? And I'm like, oh my gosh. But that is, for me, more proof that what we're talking about today is that secret sauce. It's not fancy. It's not talking about a new listing lead source, and it's not the script to close the deal. It's not your listing presentation that you send and get a certain response rate. But these are like the business basics that build legacy within your company. And so reviewing P&Ls, looking at your balance sheet, making sure that you've clearly separated personal expenses from business expenses. This sounds like a crazy one. You're like, well, I write everything off. I shouldn't do that. There's this of above the line and below the line. So above the line, you want it to be a very clear set of P&Ls, meaning this is what my business is doing. I'm netting, 25, 30%, which is absolutely possible in a service-based business like real estate. If you're not netting a third of your revenue, there's probably waste somewhere. And a real estate company should do about 33%. And so you've got to look at your P&Ls every single month, verify that you're running a profitable ship, understand where all your expenses are, and then if you're going to add personal expenses in, you do it below the line. Your cell phone, your trip to Mexico, or whatever you're doing. That's how you would manage financials. And it doesn't have to be difficult. You can hire somebody, third party, like a CPA firm, to do the financials. But if you can take a system like Firepoint, identify where you're getting business, where those closings are coming, and put them in a P&L, you can adjust on a monthly basis to kind of line up with your most profitable activities. One thing that people financials are such a big deal in the real estate world. Another piece is I would always separate listing revenue from buyer revenue. Listings are way more profitable. You don't have a split on them typically as a company unless you have a listing partner. Even if you have a listing partner, the split's probably lower than on the buyer side. So it's really important that you're classing your revenue of where you're getting that revenue so that you can actually look at it and systematically increase it over time. What 3 things would you like, Matt? So, Matt, I love your question. What 3 things would you like to get out of this seminar? I think there's really one and it's the title of the webinar. It's calendaring your time for success. Yeah. There's too many agents who work in their business on a daily basis and are just caught up in that flywheel versus working on their business. So what we're talking about is putting a 1-hour block to review your financials, putting a daily huddle for 20-30 minutes for your sales team, making sure your operations team is meeting with you once a week and really reporting back on the satisfaction of your clients. Like, I don't know, Chris, is that the one thing somebody should get, or the 1 or 2 or 3?
I think that's the one thing, no matter what, is if you ask most real estate agents or team leaders, no matter how big the team, are you doing these things, daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly? They'll be, half of them maybe yes, but it's not all the time. Like inside our company, and when I was in real estate, we have a weekly meeting with our entire leadership, and here's what we go through. We have a weekly meeting on our product. We have a weekly meeting on sales. We have a weekly meeting where all leadership gets together and we just talk and give updates. That communication, now, it doesn't have to be 5 hours a week. We're saying 30 minutes a week, or 30 minutes a day, an hour a week, an hour a month, maybe 1 or 2 hours every quarter. Get that on your calendar. Make sure you're doing these things. And I was going to say, do you have that? I don't know if you want to go over it now or after go through the quarterly piece, but the PDF that kind of goes through what you can actually do, because that PDF, I used to have a monthly, it was a monthly sheet, and I did it for an entire year, and I had a little binder that went through January through December, and I would literally pull it out, and I would check things off to make sure I've done all these things. And so if you print something like this off, and have maybe 4 copies of it, so you do it once a week, and then you have a copy for your month or quarter, whatever you do with that, it's simple enough to say, hey, am I going through and doing these activities? Because these are huge, and I know we always talk about, when Dan and you and I are talking, we talk about dollar productive activities. These provide huge returns in your business when you do them, and granted, you have to do the other stuff. You have to do the firefighting, the contract negotiations, all these different things, but if you let go of, say, recruiting for 4 days, and you don't say, hey, I'm going to make that one phone call back to this person, and if you don't do the agent one-on-ones, if you don't do the weekly or the monthly things, as a business owner, you have to keep moving that ball forward in little time increments while you manage the day-to-day fires and headaches that all of us go through.
Well, and you know what? Here's another. So the one thing is calendaring for success, like just making sure you're working on your business as a leader and you've systematized. Because one thing that drives salespeople wild is not knowing what to expect at a meeting. They don't want to be, called out. They don't want to have a bad experience. You want this positive energy and this positive kind of vibe for your sales and marketing team, because these people, they thrive and they drive energy drives them, right? So when you calendar these things, what you're doing is you're giving everybody, this is the expectation. This is what's going to happen on a weekly, daily, monthly basis. And it'll help them get clarity about what the expectation is. But one of the objections, and I'm sure you've heard this a ton of times, Chris, is like, I don't have time for what you guys are talking about. And so I wanted to go over real quick this at the bottom of this, and anybody who's listening, we're going to give you guys this for free. We're going to be sending this out. I think this kind of clearly enunciates our total conversation. But there's this one thing that is at the bottom, and it talks about dollar productive activities versus non-dollar productive activities, legacy items versus non-legacy items. And here's what I'm wanting you guys to visualize. If you're listening to this, what I'd like you to do is just do an inventory of your day. And we had a client of MyOutDesk who clearly defined this for me, and it was awesome. He just said, take stickies, just regular stickies, and throughout your day, write down what you do. And do that for an entire week. And categorize them under dollar productive, non-dollar productive, legacy or non-legacy. I'll give you some examples. Meeting prep, preparing for a meeting is non-legacy. Doing payroll, non-legacy. Fighting fires because there's a problem with a listing or a problem with a buyer situation, non-legacy. Ordering folders or pens for the office, non-legacy. Now, legacy is like building a talent management system, building a referral program, building out your CRM, like inside Firepoint, all the different tasks, creating standards and procedures for your team, not only operation, but sales and marketing. And then all the dollar productive activities, we all know what that is: networking, sales presentation, negotiating with clients and vendors, prospecting, networking and building your business. So if you just do the sticky thing, write those 3 different areas for an entire week, and then you throw those up on a board and you really look at how much of your time is spent in non-dollar productive activities. And if you train your team to do this same thing on a quarterly basis and just really review like what you're doing, I think this is a powerful activity, and you can really drive clarity about, oh my goodness, I'm spending 40% of my day on non-legacy, non-dollar productive activities, and as an agent, I'm worth $2,000 a day, or an hour, or whatever your number is, right? You should know your number, and I'm spending all this time on stuff that I could have a virtual assistant do. I could have an in-house operations person do it, or an admin. And so what we're talking about is just really understanding what your leverage points are.
Yeah, I think that's huge. And if somebody hasn't gone through that conversation really quick about the dollar productive activities and what your time is worth, super quick snippet on that is like, let's say I'm on the phone, and because I can say who I am instead of my telemarketer or whatever that is, I can go through an hour of phone calls, set 2 appointments, hand it off to a listing agent. One's going to go to close. I'm going to make $3,500. That is a $3,500 an hour activity. So that is hugely productive. And so really trying to, and you can't always do dollar productive activities, but kind of what I'll do personally is I'll look at my calendar every couple hours or every half a day when I don't have appointments, and I'll try and go back and backfill what did I do for the last 2 hours. Because when you're jumping around to a lot of different things, I'm like, well, I spent half an hour on this project, 20 minutes here. I mean, if it's 5 minutes or 2 minutes, I don't even care, but I try and just block out main things I worked on. So I can look back 3 months later or a month later, look at my calendar and say, oh my gosh, where's all my time going? And what are the areas I can work on that to keep moving the ball, not just of my leverage forward, but make sure I'm focusing that 80% of my time or 20%, yeah, 80% of my time on things that are really producing the results and leverage off the rest. Because that's where, I mean, there's usually a few activities that are returning huge results, and then we just let the rest of it absorb our time. I mean, if you focus on that financial piece that's delivering a lot of value first, I mean, like Daniel said, money cures a lot, if not all, of the different evils that are out there. I mean, we can go through and hire things and hire coaches and training, but you have to make sure you're focusing on the right things first.
Well, and you said something I love. If you use an electronic calendar, you can do it, whether it's stickies, but at some point you have to step back and just do an assessment, because the 80-20 rule is a real rule. Like, most of your results come from a very small percentage of activity that you do. And so if you can expand that, even double it or triple it over the next year or two. And so when we're talking about like what do you do on a quarterly basis, I would look at what are my tasks, and then I'd train my team to do the same in just a meeting. Like, how much of my time am I actually spending? How much of my energy is on non-legacy stuff? And if you do that, I think you'd have a very positive result long term.
I like that. Can we jump into really quick on that kind of quarterly activities?
Yeah.
So kind of things that I did, I know we both have different cadences, but they're really similar to this, on a quarterly basis, was block out a couple hours for kind of a quarterly sit-down meeting. This could be, obviously, it can be evening, it could be during the day, whatever it is, but it was more stepping back and looking at the whole picture and saying, where was I? Am I happy with it? And evaluating what I'm going to change over the next quarter. So one piece was looking through all of your marketing budgets. And again, knowing your return on investment in a perfect world, if you're using Firepoint, if you're doing it on a spreadsheet, whatever it is, you know your cash conversion cycle. And if you haven't heard about that, it's the most important thing in the world, because obviously all these things are the most important thing in the world. But if you're saying I made 6-to-1 return on investment, I made $300,000, that means nothing without time. I made $300,000 in a week, a month, or a year based on how much I spent. You have to have time in there. And so if you know that I have this lead source that's a 2-to-1 return on investment, but it converts every 60 days, it's a way better return long-term than a 6-to-1 that converts once a year. So if you put those together, you're looking at all your marketing budgets. And then another piece is stepping back and looking at all your credit card statements. I would say real estate agents or business managers in general, a lot of times their team is using their cards, not this $15 a month subscription, this $50 a month, they switch something. And so you just pull out credit card statements, you go through each line, and you make either yourself or somebody else on your team say, hey, what is this for? Is this operations, is it sales, is it marketing? Because money is money. You're working for it and you're paying it. So spend a little bit of time to make sure you're canceling things that you're not using anymore. And then also going into, I love that calendar evaluation. If you would put that in once a quarter and say, hey, where are you spending your time? What can we work on as part of that analysis? And then I'd also say, kind of going through the SWOT analysis. And Daniel had this on the right-hand side of that PDF as far as what do you do to go through your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Some people go through trends. But look at what your strengths are, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in every department. And then come together as a company and say, what are we going to work on over this next quarter? Maybe it's the top 2 strengths we're going to spend more time on. Like, hey, this one thing worked a little bit. We did a class or do this online thing. Let's push that to the next level and test it out more. And then what are our weaknesses? Well, clients are frustrated about this, whatever that is. The team votes on those top 2, 3, however many you decide, in all those different areas. And then you make those your next quarterly goal. Okay, every department, how are you going to move these items forward inside your department so we can keep moving things?
I love it. I went ahead and shared my screen again because I think it's so powerful what you're talking about. One thing that I would add in there, this is something that real estate agents don't really do enough of. I wanted to know how much of my market was I owning. Like, okay, wherever my target was, like, and most people so most real estate agents think in terms of how many transactions did I close or what's my GCI, which is great, but that helps the broker, because guess what? Typical brokers are paid on how many transactions you do or the volume of transactions, because it's a percentage. What you ought to be doing in terms of a quarterly check-in when you're doing your SWOT and whatever is, what's my market share and how much money am I putting in the bank? Like those 2 things, like market share and money in the bank. Like, there's nothing else that really matters. And I think this is really a big, powerful thing to do on your monthly P&L checks and balance sheet checks, but on a quarterly basis, I like to set those goals. And here's the other thing, that's for the business owner, right, Chris? For the team, you want to translate that goal into how many families served or people helped, because remember, we're going to build a purpose-based business, and so that would be your purpose, like encouraging home ownership, in my Sacramento area or whatever area you're in. So I think that's really a powerful thing to do on your quarterly check-ins. But yeah, I think that kills quarterly. What about annual? Let's talk about the annual side, unless there's anything else on the quarter.
That's all I've got for the quarter. And I love that idea of translating into the purpose, like the purpose-driven or purpose-based business, that people, especially when you're talking to your sales agent, your account managers, your transaction coordinators, whatever that is, they want to know the why behind it, not just how much money is business owner going to make, but obviously business owner has to make money to take risk and keep fueling and keep everything growing, but there has to be that why behind it, and that what connects to the top doesn't always connect to the bottom, so you have to make that translation for everybody. And from an annual basis, for us, it was more of the same. Like the annual, instead of quarterly planning, it's the annual planning. Like the retrospective, how did we do? What did we hit? What did we miss? And not having ego in that. The idea that, well, everything that worked was John's idea, everything that didn't work was Sally's. It doesn't matter. It's a team. And the team came together. Everybody put in ideas. The team chose what ideas we move forward. It doesn't matter whose they were anymore, because now we're all giving our input into executing those ideas. So there's never like, it's not the pats in the back like, hey, your ideas were amazing. It's just the team chose them. The team moved them forward. Here's what we failed on. Here's what we succeeded. And then you do the same thing. Say, what are we going to do the next 6 months, the next year? And that kind of might translate into some of your quarterlies. But you still say, here's our big annual goals. You go through that quarterly process at the beginning of the year and plan out that first quarter again. Yep.
And I have, so at MyOutDesk, if you're thinking about doing this, the annual goals, I think, has to incorporate the stages, like what stage you're in and are you trying to grow to the next stage. And so I think you have to have that technology around what you're going to be doing next. Because when you set goals, you kind of need to have a level to go to. That's why we all wear the Fitbit, so we know how many steps we took and how many stairs we climbed. But so I think it's very important that you do a seven-figure agent map. I think it's important that you look at the stage you're currently at, and then what's the challenge to get to the next step. And that communication of connecting the why is massively important. And then I think there's a big piece of strategic goals, like what are you going to do as a team? And I love what you were saying. We just had our annual conference where we actually had 700 people in a room together, and I asked the question like this, because I believe in co-creating the goals as a company. I don't believe that they should come from a top-down pyramid. I think and this applies for real estate companies or major corporations. I believe the pyramid needs to be swapped. And you heard about that in like Think and Grow Rich, where we're going to be a more employee-driven thing, and that book was written 80 years ago. So all of these things that that we've heard about are now coming to fruition. And so the question that I asked in our planning meeting, and it was just a conference really, was what is the one thing that you value about working at MyOutDesk? What's the highest and best experience that you've had? And then if you were to choose one goal for us as a company to work towards, what would that be? And the beauty around asking that question, and it doesn't have to be one. I wanted one because we had 700 people. I didn't want like 5. But the beauty around that is you're getting input from everyone, and then you're going to repurpose that input out there and say, hey, as a leadership team, we chose, these 3 big rocks, right? We call them big rocks in our business. These are the 3 things we're gonna focus on in the next 12 months, and we're gonna, go after them like crazy. It's what everybody's feedback is telling us. And believe it or not, your agents at the call level and your operations people who are doing all the TC work and all the client interaction, they're likely going to know what the business needs. Absolutely. As well as you, And so we call that co-creating our business plan. And we find, wildly enough, we're coming on this right now and talking about this, Chris, but this is when to do it, because it's year end. It's already 2018, right?
Yeah, and that's so true. And like that co-creation process, I mean, a lot of people that come into real estate, they're a good salesperson. They haven't gone through leadership trainings and different things or had multiple businesses. And so they come in and they manage from the top down. I know I've done that also. And you basically say, here's what's going to happen. Now just go do it. That co-creating process gives everybody ownership in what actually gets created. And so they own that and they know they had input into it. And even if their thing didn't get chosen, or their idea, they know they were heard, it was validated, they had the air to do it. And so kind of ours internally worked a similar, tiny bit different. We said, hey, here's a couple goals that we're going to hit. And so leadership team, how are we going to hit these? And so it went through this whole process of like, okay, how are we going to hit these goals? What's going to happen? Is it from referrals? Is it from improving our customer service? Like, how are we going to do these things? And then they took those back to their teams once we had those goals and said, okay, company, how are we going to hit these? So it went from the few goals to leadership to figure out how to hit them, to teams figuring out how to implement. And then also putting teams in place, like inside Firepoint, we have our client engagement team, and we have our product team. And these are employees that, like the product team is one person from development and people from account management, sales, operations, that are all working on how do we work on the product process? How do we work on engaging our clients and giving them what they're asking for, to make sure that it's not just happening from like their cross-functional team. So dealing with the client engagement isn't just happening in our account management department. It's happening across everything. So everybody has input that's valuable to see what's happening. And a lot of times a decision made here trickles down to everywhere else, but everywhere else doesn't get heard in that process.
Yeah. And what I like about what you're doing is you're setting the goals and then you're assigning ownership to those goals. And you're saying, and then you're assigning how to get those goals done. Yeah. And I think that's brilliant. The other thing I'd like the who is going to do the work is as important as the what, right? So as a leader, you might say, look, I want a referral program and I want it to look like this and I'm going to get affiliates. And then you look down and you have, 2 operations people, an account manager and 7 salespeople. And they're like, who, yeah. So there might be a situation, and this is what we love, is the leverage planning is as important, because who's going to do the work and how are they going to get it done can be the execution or non-execution of that particular project. So it's super important to just look at your leverage of the business on that at that annual time too.
So true. Yeah.
Well, dude, I feel like we've covered a ton in this conversation.
Yeah, we absolutely have. And I think, like, bring it back to that beginning part. Like, if there's anything that people take away from this, it would be, first of all, print off that PDF and put it on your wall and just cross things out and check things off on it, or smiley faces, unhappy faces, whatever you do, that you're moving the business forward. Block that time on your calendar, daily, weekly, monthly, and quarterly. And when you look at that, if it's half an hour a day, an hour a week, maybe an hour a month, 2 hours a quarter, and a couple hours for the year, that's not crippling amounts of time to make sure that the business is moving forward. You keep fixing a couple things or improving a couple things. But I know, Daniel, you talked about that 7-figure agent process. I mean, you bring them through also if they have interest in that?
Yeah, so, okay, we do this. So the 7-figure agent map is just saying, look, today you're making $500,000 and you want to make $1 million. Well, there's 2 steps between that. There literally are 2 stages between those 2 steps. And there's particular challenges in each of those stages. And so what we do is we'll find out where you are today and then figure out where you'd like to go, and then talk about, because real estate is real estate. I've sold in LA and Oakland and Sacramento, and it's all the same. So that's the beauty of it. You don't have to recreate anything. We have this concept of R&D, right? Rip off and redistribute. Like, we literally, you go and you find people who have mastered a particular thing, and then you ask them how, and then you ask them for their playbook. And that's what the 7-figure agent map is. It's the playbook, how to get to a point where you're netting $1 million. So in that, we'll list out your particular challenges in the break through the design. So we get the map, we figure out where you want to go, what's in it for you, what you need to do in terms of your team, and then we'll list your particular, personal to your business, personal to your real estate company, like what is your challenges. and then we'll look at what the dollar opportunity for those challenges are, and then we'll look on who do you need to hire. Is it a physical person? Is it a leader? Is it more salespeople? Is it a CRM? Is it a marketing company? You know, a lot of agents, you know, come in and their biggest challenge is getting more listing leads. So we realize, hey, you know, you need to get some marketing strategy at a high level. You're obviously a great salesperson, but you've never done that at scale. So we might find a marketing consultant, right? But the point of the breakthrough design is it's a very clear cut. These are your 6 things that you're struggling with. This is the dollar impact, so you can force rank them, and then who can solve those problems for you? Because you don't want to. You want to stay in your strength zone, right? You're probably a salesperson. You're the number one salesperson. Stay the number one salesperson. And so we'll do this breakthrough design, and after we do the breakthrough design, we'll then look for opportunities within MyOutDesk, because typically there just always is. When you're growing, you need leverage, and that is the one thing that causes growth, is hiring the right people at the right time as you're growing the company. And then we'll help you through the next steps of what that looks like, whether it's a virtual person or a physical person or a consultant or a coach. Whatever it is, we'll connect you with the right people within the industry to help you on your growth, you know, path to netting $1 million. That's what we do.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, I mean, is there anything else that you want to add as we kind of wrap up? And obviously, download the PDF, make sure you have that, put it on your wall. What else?
No, you know, I would also really do that leverage kind of what my activity thing is, stickies, or do it like Chris does it with his calendar, whatever is best for you. Teach your team to do that. The 80-20 rule, like, you know, 80% of your results come from 20% of your effort. Like that's a real thing. It's been proven like for hundreds of years. And so what you all, if you got, you know, from us, calendar these things, do that kind of an assessment on what your activities look like, and, you know, watch yourself grow. That would be, you know, like, that's what we're talking about.
Absolutely. And that 80-20, I mean, when you're in the sales business, lead with revenue. I mean, get the revenue there, and don't let off that gas until you're ready to leverage in other areas. I think people get onto the operation side or the back end side too fast, and they need to stay on the sales side, drive the revenue. And even when they get that sales team in place, that leverage and that revenue is now from good sales management. So don't take your foot off the sales management, the coaching, the scripting, the call analysis, like all this different things. I mean, stay on that revenue side, that 80-20 rule. And then I obviously going back to one of those things, like when you're hiring somebody that needs to be an expert that you don't have expertise in, use somebody else to help bring them in. But again, just rewatch this, go through that cadence with it, but make sure it's on your calendar and go through the process.
And on this replay that we're sending out, or the blog post, or the infographic that we shared earlier, we'll have this content written out. We'll have a place, so if you want more information, either about Firepoint or about MyOutDesk, there'll be a place for you to register and say, you know what, I need help because this is too much, and I got all this craziness going on, and I need to understand more, like what is a legacy versus non-legacy. Whatever you need, our businesses are so similar in the fact that we just want to help the real estate industry. So no commitment. The only thing you're going to risk by kind of checking out, by registering and saying, yeah, I want to talk to somebody, is your time. And for us, it's 20, 30 minutes. So I think that's a good investment. And I know Chris and I are giving away a bunch of free stuff when you do that. I know you waive the setup fee if you don't have a CRM. One thing that's really powerful about Firepoint is the CRM and the phone system is tied together, which from a business management strategy position is the biggest challenge that we have. So I love that. And if you can train your people to use it and use it right, I think that's just massive leverage in a system. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Chris, you're a badass, and I love having you on these things. It's so much fun. And definitely download the free guide that we're giving away.
Absolutely. Hey, thank you, everybody. Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you.